Hi, welcome to the first episode of Fighter T Shot Time. In this subsection of my videos, we're going to cover how to make things and do things in the shop to get you out on the field so that you can hit people with sticks. One thing I'd like to add about anything it comes to building things for the SEA is that every last fighter has strongly held opinions. Those opinions may or may not be based on any kind of fact, research, or data, and might be based off of just anecdotes, but we are all opinionated, and we are all convinced that we know the right way. I'm only showing you my ways. I'll talk about some of the other ways here and there to give you some information, but if you have somebody working with you in person and they contradict everything I say in this video, that's fine. I expect that, to be honest. In today's Fighter T Shop Time, I'm going to take this very long pole of rattan and I'm going to cut it down into a weapon or two. The first weapon I'm going to be making today is a nagamaki. It's a Japanese specific weapon. Depending on where you are in the known world, you may or may not have seen one of these before. But basically it's a sword polearm hybrid that's half blade and half handle. My particular fighting house are big fans of them, and they are my favorite two-handed weapon. Some of the construction of that may not work in your kingdom. I know that some kingdoms require pole arms to have multiple layers of rattan and foam or something between them to bulk up those layers to represent something. I don't know. The West Kingdom doesn't do it. I'm going to construct half sword blade, half handle, and I'm going to make a sword blade just like I would for any other sword. The first step for making any SCA weapon is taking your length of rattan and cutting out the length of rattan you're going to use. Now, rattan's a natural product. Not everybody is going to think about that, but that means it's going to have some curves and kinks to it no matter what. So you end up having to kind of shoot your eye down it and try to find which section is the straightest or the curviest or is going to work for whatever weapon you're making the best. This particular rattan has been stored in my garage for a few years and has a very pronounced bow. I feel like this end has got the straighter section. I'm going to look down the other end of it without whacking the tripod, knocking stuff off my garage. Without me stepping out of frame. Yeah, I definitely feel that that end's the end I want to take my length from. You may have a chunk that's got really straight section, but they can bend right here. So you may end up taking your weapon, instead of off of an end, out of the middle. That's valid. Do what you need to do to get the best chunk of rattan out of your stick of rattan to make your weapon. I went ahead off camera and marked off where I need to make my cut. All I did was line the two sticks up to each other, mark off where I need to cut the longer one. You know, I don't think you need to see that visually, and I couldn't get a good camera angle for it anyway. I went ahead and just put a little T on the side that I'm going to trash. I'm going to make something out of it later, but it's trash for right now. And then a K on the keep side, just so I don't get too confused. Obviously it was going to be the only stick that's the right length, but sometimes you end up making a weapon out of rattan where both sticks are about the same length and get confusing. So make sure you don't get confused, whatever system works best for you. After you figure out which end you're going to cut or where you're going to cut, you're going to want to mark out your cut. The way lengths of weapons is a very specific thing. Every fighter has their own opinions on it. A general rule of thumb and a good starting place is for a single sword. If you're standing in a casual fighter stance, you should be able to swing it down to the ground and have it brush the grass versus ground out versus whiff completely over the ground. It should be about that length, and you may want to lengthen or shorten that off of your personal experience, but it's a good starting point if you are locking up because you don't even know where to start. For two-handed weapons, like shorter two-handed swords, like Japanese swords, generally come up to somewhere in the sternum. The longer ones that are more typically thought of as European usually come up to the chin or maybe the top of the head. My first Nagamaki, I made it as tall as I was and decided I didn't like it, and I generally gently shortened it down an inch or two at a time until I came up with about this length, just about my chin. And that was personal experience. Please do not view anything I do in my shop as the smartest and safest way to do things. They're the way I do things. Some of it's because I don't know any better. Some of it are compromises for my physique or my equipment. I have some surgically rebuilt parts, so I hold things a little bit awkward at times. I brace things in ways that are not necessarily the smartest if you bend the right way. And whenever you're handling tools and sharp things, be smart about it. And if you cut a finger off, don't blame me. And get medical attention, because trust me, they can put those things back on. I don't know that it's going to show up on the camera. In fact, I'm pretty sure it won't, but I have my started cut and my mark right here. I'm going to cut into it a little bit more with the handy dandy cheap saw that I've owned forever. Which, even with an old cheap saw, you saw that it doesn't take all that long. And it's even quicker if you use power tools. Now I've completed my cut, and the very astute of you out there are going to be like, but it's shorter than the other one. Well, yeah, this one's got a thrusty tip on it. So it's going to be a little bit longer because it's got a couple inches of foam pre-compressed and loaded up there so I can stab somebody, and if I find a gap in their armor, I don't shatter a rib. Because again, remember, we want to kill our friends, not hurt them. So the next step I want to do is I want to figure out where the spine of the rattan is. And sometimes you can feel it, sometimes you can't. But there's a little ridge on one side of the rattan. And you end up with one direction it doesn't want to bend a bit harder than it doesn't want to bend any other direction. So right here on this one, just by bending it and feeling the resistance, I know the spine is right here. And what I always do is on the ends, I draw an arrow to the spine side. Now, some people are going to tell you that you want to put that spine on your primary striking surface. Other people will tell you to put it directly opposite of that. And still other people will tell you that it doesn't matter at all. To be honest, I don't know which one of us are correct. I don't know of anybody that's done anything other than anecdotal research. Now that the parade of really loud trucks towing boats going past my house is done, I don't know of anybody that's doing anything other than anecdotal research on that. And with all honesty, anecdotes are nice, but they're not data. I was told by my knight that you want that to be on the striking surface. At the very least, that's what I remember him telling me. I might be completely wrong by his standards. But it's what I did on my last one. It's what I'm going to do on this one. Now, I need to start marking out my handle for cutting. Now, going back into those opinions, with rattan, you're going to have one side that was closer to the ground, and therefore it's a little bit thicker because that's where it started growing, and the other side is farther away from where it started and is going to be a little bit thinner. You can tell because the way these segments, before they burned off the leaves, this was the bottom of it when it was a vine. This is attached to the roots because here's the leaves were offshooting on each of these stages. I like to hold my stick upside down and have the slightly bigger, heavier end be the side I whack my opponents with. Other people have other opinions. I want this weapon to have its handle start and end at about dead center. Again, they're different lengths because I need to put some stuff on this. So I'm going to just copy where my previous one was. Incidentally, this is exactly how I figured out how long to make it. I just couldn't get a good camera angle where I had 12 foot of length for the rest of this pole. So this can go up for now. For two-handed great weapons, there are two main schools of thought for how to go about indexing your blade. The more time-intensive method that is preferred by my knight and a lot of people is you go for something that is not square, more rectangular, and oftentimes you will make the long sides on that rectangular cross-section angle in a little bit on one side, which allows you to feel in a moment's notice where things are. I'm not the biggest fan of that style because, number one, that's more work and effort on the weapon than I would care to give it. The other thing is, for myself, when adrenaline is pumping, those subtle differences through my gloves, under my gauntlets, with fighter brain going on, are too subtle. So I go for a D cross section. One side's flat, the rest of it's round. Where you line that flat side up is up to you. I put the flat side so that it's in line with my trailing hand, my bottom hand, and the fingertips of it. One of the people in my house loves D sections, but he puts it to where the flat part is on the fingertips of his main hand. Whatever works for you so that your hands don't slip and slide and you can tell where the edge alignment is is a right decision. There are a lot of different methods for removing material from rattan in a carefully controlled way. I have been told by some people to just use a sander for the entire removal process, and that took too damn long. I'm lazy and I'm impatient. I've seen a couple of power tool ways to do it, and honestly they'll scare the hell out of me, and I don't own those power tools. I go for the kitchen knife and baton method, which is not a bad way to go. I have a spoke shave, and I've used that before, and I definitely use that during some of the finishing process. Mine's currently on loan, so I won't be doing it for this one, but that's a very good way to do it too, if you can borrow one or buy one. Spoke shave, for your knowledge, is got a blade, and it's got handles on either side of the blade, and you kind of draw it towards yourself. There's a bunch of tools that are that various configuration, but one of those with a flat blade is what we're talking for that purpose. A draw knife is another thing it's called. I am going to do kitchen knife, and I'm going to set it on the rattan right where I want it. It's going to roll like 3 or 4 times. I'm going to get it to where I'm very happy with where it is. I'm going to grab another section of rattan. So it does that. Now, stick that up the camera's nose here for a moment until it does that. Now I can, as I baton it down, and this is longer than I should be batoning with, but it's the only chunk I could find. As I'm batoning, I can flex the angle of the blade to get it to bite more, bite less, and no matter how hard I try, eventually it's going to just walk its way out of the rattan. And that's fine, because I don't really honestly expect this to shave this perfect little sliver all the way to here, and I do want it to shallow out about there, because if you have a right angle in the rattan, you've created a weak spot. So you want it to just kind of taper and shallow out and come back to the skin about where your handle ends. And that's what I expect it to do. Now if I can figure it out, I'm about to go to a time lapse of me trimming all these out. If you know what I'm talking about, and you probably do if you've been in the SEA any length of time, But I've just turned this officially into a project, which means I'm done for the day.